Have you ever wondered how SEEDS is different from all the other cryptocurrencies out there? Or what are we talking about when we say regenerative economy or the regenerative renaissance? If so, then this episode is for you. My name is REcon, and I've been your host on this journey, and I've been taking us on one perspective of one story of how we get from the civilizations we're in today into regenerative civilizations. And I want to emphasize that this is one telling of one story, because SEEDS is a path, it's not the path. Hopefully there are many. And so far, it's only been a minority who's been able to tell this story. What we're doing right now is we're using crowd intelligence to be able to better tell this story. So use the comment section of this video to be able to leave feedback. What's missing? What could we add? How could we best tell this story? And then we're going to go through and keep making and remaking all the episodes based on that community feedback, so we can best tell the story from all of our perspectives. And in fact, this is the third time that this episode's been remade. So without further ado, we're going to dive right in. First and foremost, none of the crypto economic experiments of Web3 matter if we don't have a livable biosphere. You know, a few minutes perusing the Twitter sphere and you could see the devastation that's happening across our globe right now, from record-breaking floods to record-breaking heat waves to wildfires burning down entire cities and towns. It's incredible the amount of devastation that's happening right now. And what is an economic system? You know, the word economics stems from ancient Greece, and it comes from household management. And in today's global civilization, our household is planet Earth. And currently, our household is flooded, on fire, and full of trash. Our economies are destroying our home. So when we talk about new types of economic systems, if they're not founded on the need to build a regenerative civilization, then they're not fit for purpose. So I'd like to ask, is humanity experiencing a catalytic breakdown right now, or a breakthrough? And I like to think of, a baby in a womb. It doesn't have an understanding of what happens after birth. It's a complete paradigm shift. It goes through this tumultuous phase, it's the birth, and it's intense. But then afterwards, the entire paradigm shifts. So from that baby's limited perspective, it might think that life is over. And it's true, life inside the womb is over. And I'm hoping that's true today, that life within degenerative economic systems is over. And life's about to begin where we step into new types of economic systems, new types of civilizations. Kate Raworth, she's been an incredible voice of reason in this time. And she said, today's economy is divisive and degenerative by default. Tomorrow's economy must be distributive and regenerative by design. And this is what SEEDS is about. It's about designing new economic systems that can bring us to worlds that look like this. So if you type in solar punk online, you're going to see a whole bunch of images that'll inspire you and paint a better future of where we could be going. It's forgetting about all the narrative that's coming out of Hollywood around dystopia and collapse, and instead rewiring it to say, nope, we can build new types of civilizations. They're going to be beautiful. They're going to be regenerative by design. We're going to be, imagine being able to go to your city's water, the river that flows through most cities. Imagine being able to go there and swim in it, but not just swimming in it. Imagine being able to drink from that water. That's what a regenerative civilization is. It's one that's living in harmony with the rest of life on our planet, that makes life more thrivable, makes life more fertile for the rest of the species that we share this planet with. So I'm talking multi-species cities, where it's not just human-centric, it's involving the rest of the cacophony and beautiful diversity of life that we share this planet with. It's talking about making our rivers drinkable again, not just swimmable, not just less toxic, but drinkable. It's being able to be in the city center of a deeply packed metropolis and being able to zoom out and just see a forest, because we've so well integrated with the rest of life and the rest of our natural world that our civilizations are just a part of it. We're remembering that we are one part of our planet, that we're one part of this interconnected whole that's so incredibly beautiful, and it's rethinking how wonderful life could be if we lived in harmony with the rest of our planet, rather than seeing it as an other. So this is what we're calling regen punk. It's the regenerative punk movement where we're going out there and saying, look, we're going to build a new civilization and we're not asking for your permission. That's the punk part. The regen part is what that civilization can and will look like. So before we dive in to start talking about some of the other cryptocurrencies out there, I want to mention that all of these are good. We're going through a revolution in how we design our economic systems while simultaneously going into a renaissance. And I'll explain the difference between revolution and renaissance throughout this video. But I want to say all of these are great. There's a lot of learning going out there. I mean, the pace of development is just astounding. It's impossible to keep up. So this is me offering immense amount of gratitude to all of the rest of the projects out there that we've been able to learn from, because SEEDS is only able to get to where it's at today because it's standing on the shoulders of giants. And that's all the rest of the crypto projects that have happened and continue to happen and continue to push this space forward. First and foremost, we're going to be talking about SEEDS as a post-go live currency. Right now, SEEDS are this pre-go live phase. And post-go live doesn't happen until SEEDS are at least 80 cents to $1.30. We've got about 1 million different people on board. We have thousands of organizations using it. What we're trying to do is create this minimal viable economy before we create a stable state currency. So if you've watched some of the previous episodes, you get this, but just real quick, SEEDS has 2 stages of its life. One stage where it's trying to grow in value, primarily because it wants to compensate risk. The risk of stepping into a new economic system, in order to encourage people to do that, there needs to be some upside. There needs to be some benefit. And we believe that you need to equally benefit risk with compensation. Meaning, the earlier you join, the earlier you take that risk, the more risk it is, and the more compensation should be. So this is something that Bitcoin and a lot of other cryptocurrencies did extremely well. They're able to provide that incentive to get people to take that early risk to build a new financial system. But what's important is after we reach some point, which in SEEDS world, it's this minimal viable economy. Once we reach that point, we don't want to just continue to concentrate wealth, because that's ultimately what happens if that trajectory is left unchecked. We go beyond just compensating risk, and we go into this phase of wealth concentration, which is something we're trying to avoid. So SEEDS has this 2-state economic system, which really comes from the rest of life. Every living species and being out there has distinct stages of how it grows depending on what part of its life cycle it's at. A baby in a womb is growing exponentially. An adult has stopped growing physically, but then it starts growing in other ways. So this is what we want to mimic with our economic systems as we go forward. And where we're at today, so far so good. So this is the last, about a year or so of the SEEDS price, and it's been slowly ticking up. So we're about this part of our journey today. So this is really the most important part of all this, was just to say that everything we're going to be talking about with how SEEDS behaves, this is all post go live and what it looks like to have a steady state economy and a new type of civilization. Okay, wait. Isn't blockchain bad for the environment? You're talking about a regenerative civilization, but if it's built on this really wasteful tech that's just eating up all of our energy and resources, like how is this regenerative? Great question. It's because SEEDS is a Generation 3 blockchain, or it's running on Generation 3 blockchains. Right now it's currently on Telos. And Telos is orders and orders and orders of magnitude more energy efficient than, say, Bitcoin, because it doesn't have mining. So a lot of the Generation 1 blockchains, they were based on mining, which was an extremely wasteful way of securing the network. But there's better ways of doing it. Telos is one of them. More so, what's really important is that we've already become carbon negative. You can't have a regenerative economic system if you're not even sustainable. And currently we're actually carbon negative. We use such a small amount of energy to run the network that we've already subsidized planting more trees out there than it will need to run our network for many years to come, which is really cool. So one of the main reasons I did this episode is I was asked to compare SEEDS with some of its competitors. And many might assume that you'd see a bunch of cryptocurrencies on this chart. However, that's not the case. The real competition with SEEDS is existing economic systems. Systems that we're all born into and have just become so ubiquitous that many humans have come to believe that this is just the way things are, that our economies are a part of our natural world or something. So there are very few alternatives or alternative models of economic systems right now. So that's why we kind of feel like SEEDS doesn't actually have any competition outside of the existing models. And there's about 8 billion people needing to step into new types of economic systems. So all the other crypto projects and any other new economic experiments that are out there, we're allies, we're colleagues, we're not competitors. We're building the new world and we're rediscovering new ways to do it. And just like in a healthy ecosystem, you have a bunch of different species working in syntropy. I believe that'll be how these new economic systems come to rise. Is, the successful ones are going to be the ones that figure out how best to collaborate with other types of economic systems. So the outcome's going to be this syntropy of different types of economic systems where people are going to have that freedom to choose what economic system is right for you. Because our economic systems govern so much about our lives that if we don't get to choose what type of economic system we're a part of, we don't really have choice. We have superficial choice of how to engage in that economic system, but not choice for fundamental ways of interacting and fundamentally how we coordinate and the fundamental outcomes of how all of our coordination engages with our natural world. Right now, people who are engaging in capitalism, we're fueling all of that devastation that I showed at the beginning of this episode. A lot of people don't want to be doing it. So what's really cool about this renaissance that we're going through is the idea that economic systems are coming to the free market. And people are going to be able to choose what type of economic systems are right for them. And what we have here, it's just a very basic comparison between some economic systems. On the left, we have, what's driving the economic motive. On the left, we have the engine, which is profit and self-interest. And on the right, the engine is collectively created protocols. So it's conscious consideration that's driving these systems. And in the middle, we have a minority has created the goals. So what's nice about the free market is there is no minority sitting there saying, this is going to be the general outcome. And a truly free market. We don't have free markets today. What we have is a pseudo form of a free market capitalism where it is a minority that's creating those goals and dictating how things ought to behave. Anyway, so that's the main difference between economic systems is what's driving it. So you see different types of socialism where it's a minority, which might be authoritarian dictator that's controlling those goals, or it might be some elected leaders. But as we see with elections all the time, they're full of fraud, and even if they weren't fraudulent, oftentimes those people who are supposed to be representing the people at large, they're not doing a very good job of it. So we keep finding out that if a minority is creating the goals, we're really not going to get ideal outcomes. So what we needed was on the far right, where the collective is creating the protocols. So I think this is what people are really tapping into with the whole democratic socialism movement. Is if it was actually democratic, it might be a good idea. And what a democracy is, it's by the people. It's where the people actually have the direct voice in the governance of their systems. We don't really have democracies today. And oftentimes we have republics, which means people pseudo have a choice between who is going to represent them. But even then, they hardly have a choice because they're really choosing between two people. Oftentimes, they don't want either of them. So if we call that democracy, that's just not the case. So I think that's why, democratic socialism, why it feels nice, I don't think it's a really good idea because it's just giving a minority, once again, the ability to have more control. So I think that's the resistance to that idea. So then we have state-enabled coordination, which is, again, what socialism is all about. It's like, let's give the state the ability to do all of the coordinating. And then we're going to elect people into that statehood. We have the authoritarian side of communism and socialism, where it's one leader kind of calling all the shots. So that's the other axis we have, is where is coordination coming from? Is it state-enabled coordination, like the free market, where the state is required to set the bounds of the market? Because we wouldn't have this divide between homeless people on the left and people with homes on the right if there wasn't a state there with military and police that are going to come and kick those homeless people out of those homes. So free market capitalism requires that there's a state to uphold law and order, and uphold the market boundaries. So that's why I say free market capitalism is state-enabled. But what's really interesting that's happening in the cryptocurrency revolution, this whole, Web 3.0 transition, is the idea that we can coordinate without the state. We can have decentralized coordination. And this is what SEEDS is about. It's combining the best of a free market, which is voluntary interaction without having one central state actor kind of calling all the shots, with the best of socialism, which is governance by the people for actual thoughtful outcomes. Because what we've seen today is the economic motive of profit and self-interest, which was the theory behind capitalism, that profit and self-interest will achieve better outcomes for the whole. And as we've seen, that hasn't been the case. There's very little profit in keeping a thriving ecosystem intact. There's very little profit in making our rivers drinkable again. There's very little profit to be made in keeping people healthy. There's way more money to be made if they're sick than you can feed them pills. There's very little profit to be made in doing some of the things that civilization really needs to thrive. So that's where the market kind of breaks down. So SEEDS is an altogether new type of economic system. Let's keep going. So this is the very basics of these economic system differences that we see is who's driving resource allocation and who owns all the resources. So this is the options that we have today. We're either choosing between private entities or the state, or we have the market, or it's command and control. What we're seeing with the rise of new types of economic platforms is that we can have resource ownership without it being a private company or a state. If somebody owns Bitcoin, it's because they have the private keys. That's it. You don't need a private company to be holding that. Individuals can, groups can, whatever, and you don't need a state to enforce that. The resource allocation is where it gets really interesting. A lot of the revolution that we see happening in crypto, and again, this is the difference between revolution and renaissance, is the revolution is all about using the market to drive resource allocation. And that's really interesting. But what's also coming together right now with Generation 3 blockchains and this idea of decentralized autonomous organizations and decentralized governance and letting people who are part of the platform drive the evolution of these platforms is it's an entirely new box. The resource allocation is being consciously considered by the participants of those systems, where they get to consciously decide where the resources and value is going to flow in this system. And we're going to get into that next. This is one of the best memes on the internet because it sums it up so simple. The left says corrupt billionaires are the problem. The right says corrupt government is the problem. That's their big divide is, bigger big business or bigger big government. And so many people are coming to the realization that, you do realize corrupt billionaires are running the corrupt government, right? This is probably the biggest camp today, at least I'd like to think so, where people are realizing that both sides are corrupt and we need an altogether new type of economic system. And this is what's happening is, blockchain and crypto economy are allowing us to build altogether new types of economic systems. And I've said this a lot in this episode already because it's so important, is that we can radically rethink and redesign how our economic systems function, how they serve each other, how they serve people, how they serve planet. We can be intelligent about designing them so that they are regenerative by design. We're going to get into, here's a bunch of acronyms. We all love acronyms. DeFi, some of you might be familiar, and that's Decentralized Finance. And what's so interesting about DeFi is because it's an evolution from CeFi, which is centralized finance. So why centralized finance, i.e. central banking, big mega company, banks, et cetera, they're all about concentrating wealth. And that's what's happened, and that's what we keep seeing today. Why DeFi is about decentralizing finance, giving more access to these financial tools so that we can have a more equal playing field to be able to distribute wealth throughout the participants of these economies. And that's a really, really interesting and fascinating space. So beyond DeFi is ReFi, which is regenerative finance. And it's building on top of the decentralized finance foundation, but then algorithmically designing those currencies to regenerate our planet. So it's using things like game theory and conscious governance to be able to say, how are the value flows going to serve people and planet? And let's direct value towards people who are contributing to those outcomes. And then where does REcon come in? So this is the idea of regenerative economics. So it's using the ReFi currencies as base units of new types of economic systems to start redesigning how we coordinate at scale. to regenerate our Earth. So that's ultimately what our new economic systems are about. They're saying we have 8 billion people, we have this disjointed civilization, and currently we're coordinating to kill our planet. How can we redesign that coordination to regenerate our planet and build a more beautiful future that we're all wanting, but we just don't know how to get there? So it's all about coordination. That's ultimately what this whole renaissance is coming down to, is how do we redesign coordination at scale? And why REcon? Move this a little bit. There we go. Because we can't software update capitalism to fix its bugs. So, certainly people that were born in the last 10 years, but many of us, we're getting used to this idea of being able to update things, to be able to get a software patch. There's something broken about a piece of technology we're engaging with, we can fix it. But right now, we can't really do that with our economic systems. We certainly can't do it with capitalism. I mean, paper out of paper after paper comes out, and they're all talking about these really brilliant ways that we can redesign our economic systems to solve our biggest problems. But they go nowhere. They do nothing. Our most smartest minds in the world are able to design this new system that could heal us and really save humanity, but there's no way to say, yep, let's just update capitalism and make that happen. So that's something else that's really, really, really interesting about bringing our economic systems into decentralized protocols, is that we can update them. So as we get more intelligent about how we can design our economic systems, we can continually update them. And then we step into this infinite game where it's not just engaging with economic protocols that were designed centuries ago. It's continually updating our economic protocols so that they can be more regenerative and they can better help humanity solve our crises. We could better integrate all of that incredible wisdom that we can harness from humanity and use it to build better systems. And this is what's ultimately going to really drive the Web3 renaissance, is because it can be updated. And when everything's being open source and we've got the collective hive mind of the world working on these challenges, that's why things are moving so quickly, was because we can update. We can collectively bring our wisdom together to continually improve. And that's what's really, really, really fascinating, but simultaneously why things are moving so fast and it's impossible to keep up. Elon Musk recently said that money is an information system for labor allocation. So what he was talking about is money is our tool that we use to decide what we're actually going to do, i.e. how we coordinate. And I really like thinking of money in this term, because now we're thinking, okay, this is really just where we send value and resources throughout our system in order to coordinate to get certain outcomes. So we're going to talk about two different economic and financial systems here. One is our current central banking system. Where are the flows of value going? Well, right now, we're subsidizing fossil fuels. In 1 year, across our globe, we subsidized fossil fuel industries at $4.5 trillion. And this was recently, like $4.5 trillion of subsidies in 1 year. This is making it artificially cheaper than renewable energy. So what's absurd here is we can't actually blame market capitalism for causing all of our ecocidal problems right now, because it's actually, in a lot of cases, centralized governments that are funding the problems. We are subsidizing fossil fuels when we should be subsidizing renewable energy. We're subsidizing deforestation. This just rips my heart out. Like, there are old growth forests, beautiful, majestic forests, and not very many of them left on this planet. There are some being cut down right now, and it's not even profitable to do so. How absurd is that? It's not even making us money to cut down those forests. It's only happening through government subsidies because some person thought, lumber needed to be cheaper. We need to build more houses, so we need cheaper lumber. So let's literally pay money that's not even profitable to do it anymore to cut down those mature ecosystems and forests. We are funding war. That's the number one benefactor of the centralized financial system, is the war industry. We're funding inequality. And inequality is at levels right now that any time throughout history, if it gets to these levels, civilizations collapse. So in a really short order, our current financial systems are funding the problems, and in an enormous way. I mean, just since the pandemic, right? And by the way, this article is a year old. This is May of last year. So we've created trillions more since then, but $15 trillion for the stimulus. Where did this money go? Where's the value flows? Well, the billionaires got way wealthier. A lot of them doubled their wealth, even more so than that. It was an enormous increase in billionaire value. So we saw a huge concentration of wealth and a redistribution from the poorest to the most wealthy. Small business owners lost their business, while large centralized business got way more valuable. Why? Because a lot of that $15 trillion went right into the stock market, went right into real estate, driving houses up, making it even more unaffordable for the younger generations to get a home. It's just insane what we're funding right now. This one I just saw recently. I felt like it was worth putting up here. In the US, they just voted to increase the already absurd amount of money we're spending to try to figure out new ways to kill each other. The amount they just increased it is more than it would cost to end homelessness in the US. Okay? We increased our military budget more than it would cost to completely end homelessness. So this is what we're dealing with. And this is why almost anything would be better than our current financial systems, because of how absurdly they're funding the problems and creating the crises we're seeing today. So now let's get into Bitcoin a little bit. Let me take my screen off. Bitcoin's an alternative, and it's been an incredible journey over the last little over a decade, watching Bitcoin pave the way and prove to the world that we can create decentralized financial systems. We can rethink how we distribute money. We don't need a state actor to do it. This is just revolutionary. And this is the difference between the revolution and the Renaissance we're going to continue to get into, but Bitcoin is definitely the revolution, and it paved the way to that, and it's fantastic. However, where is the value going? Where is all the resources of Bitcoin going? Well, there's only one way to contribute to Bitcoin, and that's through mining. And how much miners? Miners last year got $10 billion. And where did all this money go? It went to those major corporations that are setting up miners, but it also went to all the manufacturers making mining rigs. It went to the warehouses to fuel these miners. 65% of it went to the energy companies to pay for all of this mining. So that's $6.8 billion cost the Bitcoin network has to maintain itself. This is a massive cost. But this is also a massive amount of resources. This is where all the value is flowing. It's flowing to energy companies. I show a solar park here because I hope that we can move in that direction, but even so, that's incredibly unsustainable because of all the materials that's going into all of this equipment. So that's the thing. We're funding, again, the devastation of our Earth. More energy use, more waste of electronics, more rare earth metals, et cetera, et cetera. So both of these solutions, if you look at it from an ecosystem lens and how to build an economy that's right for our planet, both of these things are heavily financing the problems, not the solutions. And again, who's the main benefactor here on the Bitcoin side is these the mining giants that have made an enormous amount of wealth. So the fundamental thing that we need to do with SEEDS is regenerate the flows of value. And that's what we've set out to do. So when new money is made in SEEDS, like it is in either Bitcoin or the central bank note currency systems, it flows out a different way. So instead of flowing to serve centralized and minority interests, it actually flows out based on how the citizens have chosen for it to flow out. So that's why all of these are ends, is because the citizens on the system, the citizens of SEEDS, they're voting to say, where do we want value to flow throughout our system? We want 10% to go to regenerative businesses. We want X% to go to the regions that make up SEEDS. We want X% to go to the global commons to support the development and service of this entire regenerative renaissance that we're serving right now. We want N% to go out to all the people in the form of a universal earned income. So this is how we can address the universal basic income element, is we can say how much money do we want to just give to everyone who's participating and then reward them for participating. And what's really interesting about each one of these sections is that we get to start redesigning how organizations, or individuals in this case, get a share of the percent that's allocated to them. So what are we encouraging within the system? So we get to say that, N% of the global flow of money, which again, just remember, central banks in 1 year of the pandemic made $15 trillion. So let's use that as an example. Let's say 15 trillion was flowing through the system, and regenerative businesses were going to get 10% of that. So that's $1.5 trillion worth of value that's then sitting here saying, okay, this value is for regenerative businesses. So how do regenerative businesses go about earning some of that value? Well, we say regenerative because we say, all right, if you're doing fair trade, if you're doing things that are right for people and planet, if you're using biodegradable packaging instead of plastic, if you're doing all of these things that are required for us to start healing our planet, if you're doing that, we're going to literally pay you for doing that. We've got this pool of money set aside that's going to go out and reward you for doing that action. So this is a complete reversal. Where right now it's more advantageous to create plastic than it is to clean it up. We could switch that story around and say, actually, we're going to literally pay to solve our problems, which is what we should be doing. So N% goes to businesses to rewire business incentives. Instead of it just being profit and efficiency that's going to make the most revenue, we want to be conscious and say, hey, if you're being regenerative, you're going to earn revenue for that too. So SEEDS is really cool because it starts off free, but businesses that are regenerative and going beyond to do better for people and planet, we're going to pay them. It's going to be better than free for them. N% is going to go to the regional commons, and we're going to get into that next slide a little bit more. N% to all of the people, and then N% to the global commons. And just like the regional commons, the global commons it's there to support the entire ecosystem. And what's cool is the citizens then get to decide how the N% that's going to the global is further split up. So let's, again, just for easy math, let's pretend the global commons got $1.5 trillion. And it's sitting here. It got 10% of it. Now, how do organizations get a share of that 1.5 trillion? So to explain this a little bit better, imagine if the US government, when they set their budget for the year, they asked all of the citizens to poll them on what the budget should be. They're saying, tell us how much we should spend on housing, how much we should spend on healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. Every citizen got to put up their ideal budget. It aggregates it all together, and then that's what sets the budget. So that it's collectively and using humanity's collective intelligence to say, how should we spend our common resources? And this is exactly what we do with the global commons. Is any organization can show up and say, hey, I'm serving the commons in whatever way that citizens deem that serving. Maybe you're a company that's going out there and just cleaning up the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. We find that serving our commons, so we're just going to pay you for doing that. Maybe you're an organization that's out there making rivers drinkable again, or cleaning up plastic, or figuring out a way to amplify reforestation, or whatever. You're doing all of these regenerative things that's serving the commons. We could just pay you for doing that. So we're going to let the citizens say, yeah, let's give 10% to that global reforestation program. Let's give 10% to this development agency that's building all these cool tools that help us interact and coordinate. Let's give 10% to that research hub who's designing new regenerative economic models and who's rethinking governance and rethinking our civilization systems. Let's pay for these things that we need to happen. And right now within SEEDS, we have several organizations that are starting to earn some of this global common pool. Everything from a university that's rethinking how we go about learning together, and it's paying people. Like, we should be paying people in our universities already. It's completely absurd that people get into massive amount of debt in order to learn about how to be a really powerful contributing member to society. It's completely backwards. What we need to be doing is paying people to learn how to better contribute to civilization and society. And that's exactly what we're doing, and that's exactly what we could be funding if we, the people, got to decide where that money went. So going into this a little bit more, so if the citizens get to decide how you get part of that global commons, we also get to decide what's regenerative. We get to consciously say, hey, you know what, we're going to track carbon sequestration. And that businesses, we can prove that they're sequestering carbon, so we're going to give them a bigger share of this budget. And any way that we can more intelligently track what's good for people and planet, we could build that into our systems. We'll get into that a little bit more in a second, so let's keep going. So what does the regional funding look like? Well, this is to say, communities know best how to serve their community. So we're not going to tell the community how to spend money. We're going to send money to that community, and then they get to decide, as a community, how they want to spend it. And this is really cool. So this is how SEEDS is using, decentralized autonomous organizations, or what we like to call decentralized humans organizations. But either way, it's this technology that lets any group of humans come together and steward common assets. So every region on Earth, and anyone can come and set up a region, they can start earning a share of that budget before. How do they get a share of that? Well, the citizens get to decide. We could say, you know what, if you're being more regenerative as a region, meaning like if you're using the funds you're getting in more regenerative ways, we're going to give you more of that budget. So we're going to set up a little game that says, hey, regions, the more regenerative you are as a region, the more you're serving people and planet and doing good things for the world, the more money you're going to earn. So we start rewiring optimal economic incentives. Rather than the optimal just being about profit seeking, now the optimal is about regeneration. How do we best regenerate our community? So then that community gets funds, and then they can give out grants. Maybe they want to give out grants for regeneration. Maybe there's aligned businesses or projects that are looking for a zero interest loan. Maybe we just want to set up community roles. Someone wants to go around and start setting up local food systems. Good. We're just going to pay that person then in our community to go around and set up local food systems, start planting fruit trees, etc. So we get to start consciously deciding as a community where we want value to flow throughout our community to best serve our collective needs. So this is kind of unpacking all of the new economic system in one. It's saying we get to redesign economic incentives, i.e. we get to say it's better to regenerate than it is to degenerate. Let's just make it more profitable. And we could start financing the solutions that we need today. And the bigger SEEDS gets, the more value we get to flow through the system, the more regeneration we could do. Think about how many communities we could have served with 15 trillion. Or let's say it got 10 trillion, 66%. How much regeneration could we have done with that? A lot. How many local food systems? How many rivers cleaned up? How many plastics? It's an enormous amount of good that could have happened if we had a different way of distributing that value throughout a system. And I don't want to be too harsh on the old systems because it wasn't possible to do what we can do today back when those systems were designed. We didn't have algorithmic programmable currencies. We didn't have digital economic systems. We didn't have the technology to be able to communicate globally instantaneously. So it wasn't possible to actually aggregate everyone's opinion to set a budget for the US Treasury. They didn't get a choice to do that. It wasn't even part of their available options. It wasn't like, hey, should we set up a central party to figure it all out, or should we ask everybody? It wasn't possible. So they did the best, or at least I like to believe, they did the best that they could at the time. But today's civilization is a completely new type of civilization than what they were dealing with. So we need completely new types of coordination tools to help us through these times. So this is an example of how regions could start tracking things that are a little bit more than what we're tracking in our societies today. The problem with our current economic fields is all the things that are important for life are considered externalities. We don't measure them. And there's a famous saying that we get what we measure. And what we want to start doing in our new economic systems is measuring a whole lot more. So I quoted Kate Raworth earlier because of all the incredible thinking that she's done in this space. And what you see right here is the donut economic model that she's put forward. So, what if regions are actually tracking their social foundation and their ecological ceilings? And then this is what we're saying, hey, regions, you're competing to best serve this donut model. If you're reducing CO2 emissions faster than everyone else and revitalizing the land use faster than everyone else, and you're reducing your ecological footprint, if you're increasing nutrition, et cetera, if you're serving these social goods, we're going to give you more money because you're doing a good job with it. And then we set it up to say, the more effectively you can deploy this capital, the more capital you're going to get. So again, we rewire the economic incentives towards degenerating our planet, towards regenerating our planet. And we have one more over here, which is the meta-integral model, and it takes the 10 different types of capital from the 3 different perspectives. And there's a whole other video on this, so I'll leave it for another time, but suffice it to say that we can redesign what we're tracking, what we consider valuable within our economic systems, and start driving value towards those aims. Oh, this is another really, really beautiful example. We call it gratitude. So it's a new type of token that we've created within SEEDS. And really simple how this works is everyone at the beginning of a cycle receives the same amount of this gratitude token. And the token only means something once you give it to somebody else. So it's like a real thank you. Thank yous are only beautiful after I share them with somebody. And what this does is it gives a form of value to everybody who's in the system that they can share with somebody else that doesn't take from them. So if I appreciate something that you're doing, how you're showing up, and how you're serving this new economy that we're building, I can signal that without having to take money out of my own pocket and give it to you. So we get rid of economies being a zero-sum game. And what this does is it allows for anyone to be able to show up and more easily add value and get that value reflected back out to them. Because how gratitude works is after the cycle and after we saw where all the value or all the gratitude flow went, then we can send them some SEEDS, which is the stable currency within the SEED system. We could say, okay, this cycle we've set aside 100,000 SEEDS and we're going to send it to all the receivers of gratitude. And then we see where all the gratitude flow, and then we can send them value for all the beautiful ways that the community signaled that they showed up. So what this does is, in the previous scenario, we can consciously decide, what's regenerative, what's valuable within our system, and that's something we can program into it. But that can't capture all the nuances of what makes life beautiful, what makes community wonderful, what makes our civilizations worth living in. So what gratitude does is it fills the gaps there. So now there's this way for people to, whatever they find meaningful and beautiful to them, they can then signal that back out and make sure that value is flowing to support those things. So that was a whole lot that we've covered just there. So with all that said, in order to redesign the flows of value in our economy, we need something stable to be able to serve as that unit of account through our economy. So that's the primary feature of SEEDS going forward, is to create a currency that is actually stable. So if you want to know a little bit more about this particular slide and diving into it, go watch episode 12, part 1. And it dives a little bit more into comparing SEEDS against these other currencies, but we're not going to get too much into it today, so we're going to keep going. So if we need something stable, there's a lot of stable currencies out there, and whenever anyone says stable, you always got to ask stable to what? Because if you're stable to the US dollar, then your purchasing power is dropping heavily. So you're not stable to the purchasing power, you're stable to the dollar. So that's something that you really want to elaborate on and understand within the stable currency systems. When people are using that word stable, what does that actually mean? And linked in the show notes is this article that dives into a lot of the algorithmic stable currencies that are in crypto right now. I highly suggest pausing this right now and going to read that, because it's going to give you a lot of, a deeper understanding of this next section of what I'm going to go over. But if you don't want to read it, that's fine too, and you don't need to. So keep going. So what we have here is my first meme. On the left, this is the one that I actually took and modified, is we have inflation and deflation. But in both of those scenarios, what we really have is the concentration of wealth. In the central bank currency scenario, wealth is concentrating in the hands of special interest groups and those who get to control the flows of that new money. In the bottom scenario, wealth is concentrating in the hands of miners, energy companies, and hodlers, people who are just holding on to their Bitcoin. It's estimated Satoshi Nakamoto owns 5% of Bitcoin that will ever exist, a little over 1 million Bitcoins. So if, Bitcoin became the global currency, this would result in the greatest concentration of wealth of a single individual group that civilization has ever seen, ever. So both of those aren't ideal situations for a steady state economy and rethinking the flows of value, and having a currency that's able to be that medium that does help us rethink and redesign how we distribute value throughout an economy. So this is what we need SEEDS to do, is that it has that period of growth that we're in now, but then we need a stable state currency. What do we mean by that? So when we say stable to, you've always got to ask the question, stable to what? And again, I want to bring up the idea that, SEEDS is this two-phase currency. So it's going to have this growth phase and then a stability phase. And what is it stable to? We like to say intrinsically stable, because what we're doing is we're growing the supply of SEEDS to meet demand so that SEEDS remains stable against purchasing power within the economy it's in. So while central bank notes are losing purchasing power, you see that going down, and crypto assets are highly volatile and fluctuating upwards, so they're gaining purchasing power over time. Traditional investments, the reason they're an investment is they're supposed to be gaining purchasing power, right? They're supposed to be growing in value. What we want SEEDS to do is actually maintain its value over time. And what's nice is that, comparing it to other central bank currencies, it might look like SEEDS is going up in value. That's only because it's actually maintaining its value. And there's something really pernicious about currencies that lose their value, because if central banks are losing, or central bank notes are losing value at 10% every year, if you're not getting a raise by at least 10% every year, that means you're getting a demotion. You are making less and less real value year over year, because what you're getting paid in is losing value. So when minimum wage in the US, for example, hasn't increased in a decade or something like that, that means everyone who's been making minimum wage has been making less and less and less purchasing power, which has been one of the main drivers of inequality in our systems today. So what do you want to get paid in? Do you want to get paid in something that's going to be losing its purchasing power, something that's highly volatile, or something that's holding stable and maintaining a stable purchasing power? What do you want to price your services in? Do you want to price it in something where every year you're going to have to change your prices if you want to get the same amount of value year after year? This is called the menu cost. It's the cost of having to continually update your menus to reflect the real value of the currency now. So wouldn't it be nice if we had a financial instrument that actually maintained its value, so that every year we don't have to re-update, how we're measuring things and what the value of a dollar is. So how do we do that? There's entire episodes devoted to this that really get into the details, but I'll just hit real surface right here. What we're doing is, on one side we have our money supply, how much seeds are in circulation. On the other side we have our economy. And in real simple terms, basically we're saying on the left side is the supply of the currency, on the right side is the demand. And in basic economics, if supply equals demand, then the price remains stable. So that's all we're really doing in a very short form, is we're creating new seeds to meet new demand so that the purchasing power of that currency remains stable. And it's these new seeds that are being created that are then flowing out throughout the whole system and going to the people, to the organizations, etc. And part of the contribution to seeds is helping the economy grow, helping participate in the success and health of the economy, which is intrinsically tied to the regeneration of our planet and supporting those outcomes as well. So it's this win-win scenario that helping grow the economy is actually going to drive more value back towards you and our planet. So if fixed supply currencies like Bitcoin is going to replace gold because it's more scarce than gold, which is the big narrative that it has, is this idea of, true scarcity where gold doesn't have that. No one's going around buying goods and services in gold. They're doing it in central bank currencies. So it doesn't make sense that something that's designed to be gold would somehow, overtake central bank currencies. And that's why they've made no progress really in that endeavor. Because, there's this saying that for a new technology to replace an older one, it needs to be 10 times better. It needs to be better in every single way in order to overcome the inertia of changing systems. Because there's a massive amount of inertia behind the central bank currency systems. So you're going to have to be better in every single way in order to replace those. But what's better than cash? Cash is anonymous, it settles instantly, and it's pretty freaking fast. So, cash is pretty great. So no cryptocurrency that's made on the market right now is actually better than cash. And this is something SEEDS went out to fix. It said, okay, well, what's better than free? Well, better than free is better than free. So we got to reward you for using this. And if we can do that, then we've become better than cash. We need to give you more trust in this currency. So while fiat currencies are losing value, we want you to trust that this is going to hold value. But you're not just going to trust because some central institution is saying so. You're going to trust it because you have a voice in the system. You're governing it. So we can get rid of this notion of a bank run. A bank run happens when people lose faith in the currency and they all run to the bank to take their currency out because they don't trust it anymore. Or they don't trust the system. But if the majority of people within SEEDS somehow didn't trust SEEDS, which would be a weird conundrum to get in the first place, but if they didn't trust it, they could just change it. And that's why it's a weird conundrum, because they're in charge of the system. They're governing it. It's transparent. They can see what's happening. So if we can have something that's going to give you more value, it's going to reward you, it's going to be instant and global, it's going to hold its value more stable, it's going to represent your values and the things that you care about in the world, the things that are really important, like regenerating our planet. And it's something that could be more trustworthy because you can actually see everything that's happening, then we believe this is 10 times better than fiat. And that's what we need to be focusing on, is what's going to replace that central bank currency system. What's going to replace those systems that are subsidizing the destruction of our planet right now? We need to do that. We need to do that pretty quickly in order to retard the destruction that's happening. So up until now, we've been comparing SEEDS against its true competition, which is existing economic systems. But for the remainder of this, we're going to be comparing SEEDS against some of the existing cryptocurrencies that are out there. Now, there are thousands and thousands of crypto assets trying to reimagine all sorts of different types of financial instruments. But we're just going to be talking about the projects that are focused on being a new type of money, primarily a new type of medium of exchange. And the case we were making in the beginning of this is if we're thinking from the lens of creating new types of economic systems, then the currency we need is something that's going to be more stable, because we need a really stable unit of account in order for value to flow through that system. Because if how we're accounting for value is fluctuating and going all over the place and isn't holding its purchasing power, then our economy is going to be too chaotic. And that's not what we want for an economy. It's absolutely what we want for a speculative asset when the biggest benefits can be gained from buying high and selling low. You want it to be really volatile because that's how you can make the most money off of that volatility. But that's not what you want backing a new type of economic system that's really going to be degenerative and healing. So that's what we see on the x-axis, is how the supply reacts to changes in demand. On the left side, you have a fixed supply, which means that all the currency that will ever exist already exists. It's already minted and already owned by people. It's there. And that's the one extreme form, which is what you see in some of these projects here. Then you have something like Bitcoin, which is minting tokens on a fixed rate. It drops every 4 years in halves, but there's no reaction to demand. If demand increases, it doesn't care. If demand drops, it doesn't care. But what we have here on the right side is dynamic supply. And there's a lot of different ways that this occurs, but the general philosophy is when demand changes, when people are wanting more of the currency, the supply will increase to meet that demand. And when demand drops, the supply decreases to meet that new state of demand. So what we have here is a dynamic supply of the currency, which creates price stability. So it's a more stable price. And the case we're making in the beginning of this is what we need for a currency, for a new type of economic system. So we're actually not going to focus on any of these fixed supply currencies going forward. The other axis we have is that y-axis, which is how are you rewarded for participating and contributing to that system. If there's no contribution rewards, that means there's no way, at least in a decentralized way, in order to participate in the system. So something like central bank digital currencies, very unlikely is there going to be an open way to contribute to that and get paid for doing so. Something like Nano and IOTA, the supply is already fixed and out there, so they're not paying for any new contributions. The only way to get rewarded in a completely decentralized way is to buy up some of the currency, make some contributions, which is going to get the value of that currency you already own to go up. So that's the general feeling here, is to purchase some of it and then go about contributing in order to increase the value of what you've already purchased. And then in the middle you have mono contribution rewards, which is the general platform rewards are either proof of work, which means you get paid for doing work, i.e. mining, i.e. using energy, or you get paid for proof of stake, which is owning the currency and holding on to it. So that's two of the main models that we have. Is the basic platform contribution is either holding the currency or mining the currency. And then what we have here at the top is multi-contributions rewarded. And this is what we were unpacking in the beginning of this episode, is that what SEEDS is doing is rethinking how you can contribute to a new type of economic system. So we need there to be a myriad of different ways that you can contribute and get rewarded for contributing, all the way from using the currency, making it better than free, to going out there and doing anything that someone might send you gratitude for doing. So it's a completely different way of thinking about how do we capture, quantify, and reward contributions to our ecosystems. And then the last piece here is I want to bring your attention to is SEEDS version 1 versus SEEDS version 2 post go live. This version 1, which is how SEEDS is today as of July 26th when I'm recording this, it's a fixed supply currency. So it is over here. The currency is going to be volatile until after that go live phase, which is when SEEDS changes. And the SEEDS that we've been talking about in this episode is all this post go live SEEDS. All right, so moving on. The next thing is if we're focused on a currency, which is just the projects you have here, all the ones that are trying to be a new form of money. What's some of the main things that people adopting a new currency are going to think of? One, can I trust this new currency? And two, how much is it going to cost me to use it? So if I'm thinking between using cash and using this new digital currency I got, well, if cash is free to use, which is no fees right here in the center, then already all the projects that are charging fees are starting off at a disadvantage to cash. And what we approached SEEDS with is, if we're really going to replace fiat currency as a new type of economic instrument, we needed to be better than free. So we set off to have rewards for regenerative transactions, which is what we've already unpacked here, is organizations and individuals both get rewarded for contributing to the economic growth of SEEDS, i.e. exchanging in SEEDS. And if you're regenerative as an organization or individual, you're going to earn even more. So this is where it's kind of an entirely new class of currency that's rewarding participants for being regenerative and trying to heal our world and growing the economy and showing up in a myriad of different ways. And the trust factor comes in with voice. You see the projects over here on the left side where you have no voice in governance. I'm not going to trust the central bank digital currency because I have no idea what's going on with that. You know, how is it getting minted? Who gets a say? Like, et cetera, et cetera. Like, these are centralized institutions creating a new type of currency. And the same thing with Tether. It's been marred throughout the entire crypto. Everyone's familiar with this because it's so untrustworthy. They didn't publish what was going on behind it. So there's no voice in how Tether is governed, right? And it's the same thing with these. And it's the same concept with Bitcoin. There's not really a way to change the Bitcoin protocol. It's very, very difficult. But this is actually seen as a benefit for Bitcoin. And if it's, replacing gold as something that's meant to be really, really, a stable store of value that's not meant to change much, that's actually a really positive feature, is that it's difficult to change Bitcoin and it's difficult to govern it. But that's not what we want in new type of economic systems that need to be responding and reacting to our rapidly changing world. We need to be able to learn, evolve, and adapt very quickly. And it also builds trust in the system. We talked about the bank run concept earlier, but if you have a direct voice in how it's being governed and what's going on with it, like you could see all the value flows of that system, and this creates a really trusting system that completely outperforms things like central bank currencies where we can have something like the Pentagon, which is a U.S. military agency. They lost, I forget how many trillions, but they had an accounting error and lost like $10 trillion they couldn't account for. Enormous sums of money. They're blaming accounting errors, but we all know what's kind of going on there. It's just a lot of fraud and abuse. So we need currencies that are much more trustworthy. And that's what we see here. So that's what people I believe, are going to be most interested in. Is, can I trust this new currency? Do I have a direct voice in how this currency is being governed? And how much is it going to cost me to use it? And something that sets SEEDS apart from every other project that we've seen right now is SEEDS is the only one that's better than free to use, while all the rest of the stable currencies that have some type of fee that comes with them. So most of the stable currencies that I was showing before, the other cryptocurrencies, they're using this two-token model. So Celo, Reserve, Terra, Frax, I think there's a couple others. It all follows this basic model, which one token, which in this case is Reserve Rights or Luna, are the ones that capture all the value and risk. I.e., these tokens are meant to appreciate in value as the ecosystem grows. And then there's another token, in this case Reserve and Terra, which are meant to be stable. But whenever you have value accruing somewhere, it's not accruing somewhere else. So if in these two token models, we have two classes of citizens, essentially. We have the investor class and then the user class. And they're not always going to be the same. So, a lot of these projects talk about, banking the unbanked and going out there and helping some of the most impoverished people in our world have a better medium of exchange. But if you're charging fees for some of the most poorest people on the planet to exchange with, and then paying those fees to wealthy investors somewhere else in the world, all we're doing is extracting value away from these communities and again concentrating it. I don't think they're meant to be this way. It's just a function of how these things are designed. If one token is capturing all of the payment fees and all of the value, it's like, yes, they're taking on that risk, but they also get all the upside. So this is where I say, a lot of these projects are part of the revolution, which is, actually it's kind of here. Let me turn my screen off again. They're all part of the revolution. It's a reduction of fees, it's removing the middlemen, it's transparent, decentralized tech that's open for anyone to be able to participate in. This is really freaking cool. The revolution is awesome. So that's some of the upsides. Some of the downsides of the revolution model is the transaction fees. It's like, yeah, we reduced the fees, but we didn't actually get rid of them. It's the reconcentration of wealth. It's a new type of middleman. Now all the wealth is concentrating between the people that are holding the value capture token, and it's not being redistributed to the people who are actually using the stable currency because they need to. Also, it comes oftentimes with plutocratic governance. And what I mean by that is it's that, volatile token is also the governance token. And if you could buy that governance token and it's all about wealth, then we have what's called plutocratic governance, which is governance by the wealthy. So you have this economic system that all of the value is accruing to this wealthy class, that's the investor class, and they get to be making all of the decisions on how the protocol operates. And it's not necessarily the users of the platform or the people who are building it, the community, that's capturing all of that value. It's being redistributed, right? So that's why I say that these are rent-seeking platforms. And that's the traditional model because they're coming out of that traditional business lens. It's like, how do we create a business that's going to make money and capture money? So I think a lot of these projects are approaching this as how do we create a new business? So we have a stable currency as a business, opposed to how do we create a new type of economic system that we can rethink the distribution of wealth from. So that's what I say is part of the Renaissance. So the Renaissance is redesigning the flows of value. And we don't have a two-currency system in SEEDS. We have one. We just have SEEDS. So that means all the value that's captured through that ecosystem growing flows all back to the people who are participating and actually contributing to helping that grow. We don't have a two-class system anymore. It's redesigning the coordination of activities. We need to regenerate our planet. We need to start healing our communities and our ecosystems. Like, we need to rethink how we scale and coordinate, not just exchange, money. And it's starting to rethink what is value, what is valuable, and how do we co-create that together? So when we have something like gratitude, we get to rethink what is valuable in our system. When we actually get to redesign what's a contribution to SEEDS, we get to decide what is valuable. Do we value drinking water? Well, let's just pay for that to happen. Let's reward people for making our water drinkable again, right? So the Renaissance is all about removing transaction fees, being better than free so that it can replace our current systems and just be 10x better. It's decentralizing governance. It's not creating plutocratic governance where the more wealth you have, the more voice you get. In SEEDS, every citizen, you're given voice based on how much you're contributing. And there's a lot of different ways that you can contribute. And it's also scaled where there's only, get into the governance episode if you want to know more, but long story short is if you're a citizen of SEEDS, you have a pretty much equal voice to all the other citizens. So it's equalizing that voice. And then focusing on people delegating their voice to trusted people. And then those delegates end up getting a little bit more voice. So we have the best parts of direct democracy with the best parts of like representative democracy without having to have a plutocratic governance system where it's just money speaks. We want to say all contributions are valuable. We're going to rethink what is a contribution in the first place. And then the more you're contributing, the more voice you get. And we think that's really important. So we consider this all part of the new paradigm where we're rethinking what is valuable, who gets a voice, how much voice should people have in our more equitable systems that we're creating together. So coming back to this, let me turn my screen off again. So on the x-axis, what do we have here? We have simple protocols versus complex. So I've been talking a lot about new economic systems, which I'd say it's over here on the right side with complex protocols. Are these protocols designed to be new types of economic systems, or are they really basic to be new types of currencies and digital assets? So over here on the left is new financial systems. So these are currencies that, from everything that they've spoken about, they're not really interested in trying to rethink what an economic system is or how it can serve the world. And then over here on the y-axis, we have at the top, consciously co-directing value, and then the bottom, centralized value accumulation, and in the middle, decentralized value accumulation. So this is where is value flowing in the system. And the first part of this episode was all talking about how we in SEEDS can consciously co-direct where value flows in our system. We can rethink what is valuable. Keep harping on that that point. In the center is decentralized value accumulation. So all these projects, they still accrue value, but it's completely decentralized who can participate. Anyone can go out there and buy up that value accrual token, as long as you know how to do it. So it's decentralized in who can participate, but it's still accumulating value into that investor class, the people who are holding that volatile asset. It's not being redistributed to the people who are participating, i.e. the people who are using the stable currency, right? So all of these are decentralized value accumulation protocols. And then on the bottom is centralized value accumulation, which means there's typically a central company where, I can't just go out there and buy a share in it. It doesn't matter, I can't show up and buy a share in DM. I have to be, hand selected. I forget how you actually get picked. I can't buy a share in Tether company right now. So we call these centralized value accumulation. So yeah, that's one model here, is where is value flowing, and is the system thinking about creating a new economic system? And what we mean by that is new classes of currencies, not just new currencies that look and act like central banknotes, which is what all the stable currencies are mimicking, but new types of currencies like gratitude that we talked about before, new ways of signaling value, and new types of currencies that help us coordinate at scale. Also, we need new types of governance systems, thinking well beyond plutocratic governance systems, which are definitely a step in the right direction, because I could still buy up one of those voice or governance shares and start participating in governance. So it's really great that it's open like that. But I don't think we want to be creating plutocratic governance systems where the wealthy get all the voice. I don't know if that's the economic systems that we want going forward. So what protocols are talking about new types of governance systems? And new economic possibilities. So this is rethinking, again, what is valuable? How does value flow throughout our system? How do we signal value, right? What do we measure? So this is, again, we feel like SEEDS is kind of in a class of its own, although it is really refreshing to hear about some of these other projects start bringing up these topics. And I think it's part of their roadmap, too, to see them move more in the direction of creating more complexity to be new types of economic systems themselves. Just haven't quite seen that yet. This is probably one of my favorite ones, and likely the most important one of all of them, is we have two things right now that if we don't solve them, civilization is on a course to collapsing. One of them is our inequality crisis. Again, I talked about it at the beginning of the episodes, but anytime inequality reaches the scales that we're seeing today in previous civilizations, they've collapsed nearly afterwards. And we have something else pretty tremendous we're facing right now, which is ecological degeneration. So our climate crisis, our crisis of meaning in our communities. So it goes beyond necessarily planting more trees and trying to figure out a way to sequester carbon. It goes more into, how do we want to show up in the world? How do we want to relate with our Earth? Like, how do we want to relate with the rest of species on our planet? How do we rebuild communities so our needs are being better met? Not just our basic needs, but our needs for, love and understanding and purpose and community. So when we talk about ecological regeneration, humans are an inherent part of our ecology. And I think a big reason why we're harming our environment so much is because we're being harmed so much. And we're being harmed by our current economic systems. The ones that ask us to do mundane jobs that suck the life out of us. The ones that are requiring that 1/3 of the human populations are on some type of medication because they're sick or unwell or have a mental disease or illness. All of this is feeding into how we're treating our world because of how we're being treated and how the systems that we're a part of are treating us. So this is the bigger story that we really need to be focusing on, is how can we create economic systems that start reversing the degeneration in our social and environmental systems. So that's what we see on the x-axis is, what type of protocols are financing ecological degeneration on the left. And unfortunately, Bitcoin, it's financing an incredible amount of ecological degeneration with rare earth metals being ripped up, warehouses and factory space and electricity usage, and it goes on and on. Over to the right side, which is financing ecological regeneration. And then in the middle, which is fairly neutral. So projects are put based on, which platform they're on and how much energy use is required to run their platform. So a lot of them are being run on Ethereum right now, which is moving towards proof of stake. So that's why they have a possibility of, being net neutral. And I appreciate that with things like Celo and Terra. They're talking about being carbon neutral or even carbon negative. That's fantastic to not be causing degeneration, which is why they're not part of this side over here. They're moving towards just being neutral or maybe even having a bit of a net benefit. But we need to go well beyond that. We need economic systems that are actively financing the restoration of our environments and communities. And then we have the other axis, which is reversing inequality at the top, which is rethinking the distribution of value so that value flows are coming out in a more equitable way. If you go back and watch episodes 1 through 4, we actually talk about how we reverse inequality. So if we're sending resources to communities, the poorer communities in the world are going to get relatively more value than the richer communities. So that over time, as more people and more communities participate in SEEDS, we're actually reversing inequality, and we're gradually reversing it, which is so important, because if we're going to avoid, civilization collapse because of inequality, we need to start reversing that, but we need to do it in a way that's fair and sustainable. We can't go and say, hey, wealthy people, we're going to take all your wealth. That's going to create a lot of conflict and problems. But what we can do is say, hey, we're going to step into a system that's going to very equitably redistribute wealth, so we can reverse inequality, but still reward everyone who's participating and make it better than the central bank currency systems that they're a part of. So I think that's a really, really important story. And why I have the ones that are down fueling inequality is because they typically have this, two-class system where one group is going to get a lot more of the value than the group of people who are actually using and participating. So it's going to end up fueling that inequality. Another thing you want to look into when you're looking at projects is, what was the initial token allocation? Like, when these projects were launched, who got all the value? So we're always talking about value flows. And what the initial token allocation is, it's what was the initial flows of value? Who got rewarded? Who's holding all the wealth? Who benefits if this thing's going to succeed, right? And what you see here is, public cells in blue, but really that should be part of insiders, because if insiders includes all the team and company and the VC that purchases the tokens, etc., the public cell was done by the team. So it's the resources that team got to pay their own salaries, etc. So I really like thinking that blue and red, might be pink, I'm a little bit colorblind, are part of the same. So take that in mind when you're looking at this. The one that I think is most important is the community allocation, because that's when we get into, is this a more equitable system? Is this rethinking the distribution of value? Like, how much of the value of this new system does the community direct versus the, the VCs and the insiders and the company that set it up, etc. So what we have as SEEDS is 75% of the initial supply of SEEDS were set into accounts that the citizens themselves directly control. These are a variety of different accounts. In the show notes, you see a link to the Token Allocation Economics doc. Go check that out to get the full details of it. But in short form, some SEEDS are set aside to give out as alliance grants to people who are already building a regenerative civilization. So if you're a company, a movement, a business, an ecosystem that's been serving the regenerative renaissance, show up to SEEDS, ask for your share of this new economic system, and the citizens might be granting that to you. There's another set aside for things called campaigns. So we want to invite everyone to join SEEDS with a little bit of a gift. So a campaign is something like, go find 3 of your friends, go out there and plant a tree, and as a thank you, SEEDS ecosystem is going to send you $100 worth of SEEDS for doing that. So a campaign is a way to invite people into the SEEDS ecosystem, give them a gift of some of the initial supply of SEEDS, whilst they're going out there and doing beautiful things in the world, and some of the stuff that our regenerative civilization requires. So anyway, and there's some SEEDS set aside for the seed bank and a whole bunch of other stuff. So anyway, 75% is controlled by the community themselves. 20% was set aside for Hypha, which is a decentralized, autonomous human organization that a lot of people across the globe have been able to join and be a part of. But Hypha is that organization that's been helping build SEEDS and launch it. And it took 20% of the initial supply in order to bootstrap the launching of that. And it's been funding a lot of ecosystem projects in the process too. And then 5% is what's available for sale right now. So if you go to joinseeds.com or joinseeds.earth and you click on buy SEEDS, you're buying from this 5%. So only 5% of the total supply was actually going to be out there being bought by investors being able to come in. So it's a really small amount. And what's nice is from now until go live, only 40% of this total 100% supply is going to be in circulation pre-go live. And this is important because we want to maintain economic stability, meaning we don't want to put more seeds out into circulation than there is demand for actually buying those seeds. Otherwise, the thing will collapse. Like, yeah, we can say we're redistributing value, but if we're giving people a token that no one else wants to buy, then we're not redistributing value, we're redistributing fake online tokens, right? So that's why it's really important that how we distribute seeds at any point in the history or life cycle of seeds, we're always matching supply and demand. So these seeds only go into circulation, this 5%, when somebody buys them. So they come into circulation with people buying them. The other 35% that's available to go into circulation is coming out through those campaigns. And the idea is we're giving a relatively small amount of seeds to a large number of people for doing some type of contribution to seeds. So you can imagine that if you got $100 worth of seeds for going out there and planting a tree over the weekend, your first impression probably isn't to go and sell these seeds. It's probably something you want to hold on to because you're invested in this system. So this is how we wanted the first seeds going out, is a small amount as an invite to everyone who's showing up to the system and people who actually paid for them to help finance the development and thriving of this ecosystem. So again, this is something I always recommend that when people are looking into projects and who to support, go back and say, okay, where did all the value flow? Who really benefits when I buy up one of these tokens? Like, who's going to get all the benefit from that? Out beyond ideas of revolution and wealth concentration, there was a renaissance. I'll meet you there. So this is inspired by Rumi, but the idea is that this crypto ecosystem, there's an incredible amount of experiments going on. A lot of wealth is being redirected from the legacy systems into the crypto ecosystem. And it'll be so incredible if we can redirect that value towards regenerating our planet, rebuilding our communities, and building new types of economic systems that humanity needs in order to build the civilizations that we want to be a part of. So that's why I'm thinking, like, it's fantastic that Bitcoin and the likes paved the way for the revolution, but I think we can go a little bit farther, and I think the Renaissance is the possibility that we're aiming for. Okay. I'm going to let you all go at this point because there's quite a lot to cover there. There's a lot of different episodes in this series, so I welcome you to go back and watch some of them to get a fuller understanding of the economics and how all this works. There's a lot of different links in the show notes where you can continue to go and learn more. And I highly encourage you to come and participate in Discord and in the SEEDS Passport itself. Get an invite to that, go to the forum, and start participating in governance. Share your ideas, and we can start building a new economic system together.